It happened in the time of the Pacha, the great King Manucher. It happened in the time of Sam, Lord of Sistan, Palavan, champion of Iran. Come now and listen to the story of Zaal, and how he found love in the month of Farvadin, when love embraces the lonely winter and turns it into spring. Sam, Lord of Sistan, Palavan, champion of Iran, had everything, but had nothing, for he did not have a son. But one day it was announced that from the women's quarters a son was born to Lord Sam. He was a healthy, strong child. He had his father's large black eyes. But his hair after all was white, white as snow, white as magic, white as old age. No one had the courage to announce to Lord Sam this strange birth. No one except the midwife who delivered the child. She came before Lord Sam herself, saying these words, "Lord Sam, it was I who had the honor of leading you through that dark corridor into this world. And now, many years later, I have come here today to announce the arrival of your son. My lord, you have a beautiful son. He has your strength, your vigor, and that integrity in the look in his large black eyes. But his hair is white, white as the snows that cap the Elborz mountains. Come now and give thanks to God for this beautiful son that has been offered to you." But there was no gratitude in Lord Sam's heart that day, for this is what he said to himself. After all these years waiting for a son, is this the son that God has given me? A son who has reached old age without first passing through manhood? How can I show this strange son to my peers and not be filled with shame? Better to hide this shame from the gaze of an unforgiving world. And so Lord Sam at once went to the women's quarters, snatched the newborn child from its mother, deafened himself to her cries, and with 2 horsemen took that child in its swaddling clothes, and together they rode north towards the foothills of the Elborz mountains. And when they arrived there, they found themselves in the wilderness, the high mountains beyond, and wasteland around, the green hills, the wind whistling in their ears. And in that barren, forgotten spot, Lord Sam, carrying his newborn child, placed it on a bare stone in the middle of that wilderness, placed it there to perish before the elements. And there is where the child was left. He cried and cried up to an empty blue sky that had no mercy to offer in return. It was a cry that shook the heavens, for it was the cry of an orphan. The child wept and wept and wept, until a moment came that through his tears he saw a cloud flashing all the colors of the rainbow approaching him. As that cloud came closer, the newborn child saw a magnificent bird, a bird whose wing's breadth was the length of a whole valley, a bird who had feathers all the colors of the rainbow. It had the majesty of the eagle, the beauty of the peacock, the fierceness of the hawk, the gentleness of the dove. For this bird was Simorgh, king of the birds, Simorgh, mother of every living thing. And as Simorgh approached this newborn man-child, with its bright diamond eyes, bright as falling stars, looked upon the white, soft flesh of this newborn man-child, and a growling hunger came within her. And with her talons sharp as swords, she was going to plunge those talons into the soft flesh of that newborn man-child. But just as she was about to do so, she heard that cry, that terrible cry that could break 1,000 stones, that terrible cry that broke her own heart. And she looked at her talons, sharp as swords, and with those talons, she made a cradle and placed that man-child within it. And with her wings bright as all the colors of the rainbow, she flew up with that child, up, until she reached the summits of the Elborz mountains, where she had made her nest. And so the years passed, and that is where that man-child grew up. Some years later, there were reports from travelers who passed through that very place, reports of a strange sighting of a young boy with a mane of long white hair, ambling up and down the rocky face of the Elborz mountains. Many more years passed after that, until the night came. The night came when Lord Sam had a strange dream. In his dream, he saw a vast army on its way to conquer India. The army was led by 2 horsemen. One horseman had hair that was raven black, his cheeks ruddy with youth. And the other horseman had hair that was long and white, and a beard, and a face etched with the wrinkles of many years. Now the young horseman greeted Lord Sam, who returned his greeting. But when Lord Sam turned to the older horseman, the horseman would not respond. And Lord Sam was taken with this rudeness, so he turned first to the younger horseman, and he said, "Has your kinsman lost his manners? He has not returned my greetings." To which the young horseman replied to Lord Sam, "My lord," he said, "I have to greet you back, for I have no choice, for I am your present." "Well, if that is so," protested Lord Sam, "how come your kinsman does not respond to me? How come he is so rude with me?" To which the young horseman replied, "My kinsman, after all, Lord Sam, is your future. and he cannot return your greeting until you claim him. And when Lord Sam woke up from his dream, he understood its meaning. That child, his son that he left so many years ago, was after all still alive. He remembered that day he left him on that bare rock. And after all those years, all that cruelty of that moment overcame him. And he knew he had to return. He had to return to reclaim his son. And so the next day, with 2 horsemen, together the 3 horsemen rode northward towards the Elborz mountains, towards that wilderness, that very place where Lord Sam left his newborn son so many years ago. He dismounted from his horse and approached that bare rock where he left his son. And the moment came back to him, and seeing the bareness of the rock before him, it broke his heart in 2. At once he collapsed before that bare rock and wept like a newborn child. And high up in the summits of the Elborz mountains, Simorgh, with her diamond eyes bright as falling stars, could see everything below. And she understood at once that the child that she had been raising all these years had his father below, who had come that day to reclaim him. And so Simorgh called the child he raised, who at that time was already a tall, handsome, broad-shouldered man, with a long mane of white hair falling to his shoulders, and his large black eyes looking at Simorgh with all the wisdom and all the innocence that she had taught him. And she spoke to that young man, saying this: "My child, I have raised you all these many years, but today, below these mountains, your true father has come to reclaim you. And so today you must leave me." But the tall, broad-shouldered man with the long white hair that fell to his shoulders looked back at Simorgh with those large black eyes welling with tears. And through his weeping he tried to speak to Simorgh, king of the birds. "What are you saying? What are you saying? Why do you banish me today? For don't you understand? Don't you understand that your nest is my only home? And these mountains that have surrounded me is my only world? Why do you banish me when I will only be a stranger? When I will only be a stranger in the world of men?" And the young man wept and wept. But Simorgh, with her bright-colored wing, feathers of all the colors of the rainbow, reached out and wiped the tears that were falling from the cheeks of the young man. Her wing like a rainbow chasing away a rain cloud. And she spoke to the young man, saying this: "Dastan, trickster of my heart, why do you weep? For don't you understand that today you are standing on the threshold at the threshold of a new life of courage and love. Dastan, trickster of my heart, why do you weep? For though you will be leaving me, I will never leave you. For I will be in your every breath, in your every thought. I will be in every step you take. And so the young man tried to console himself with these words from Simorgh, his mother. And he found the courage to decide to return down and greet the father who had come to reclaim him. And so he mounted on the back of Simorgh, and Simorgh, with her rainbow-like wings, descended from the heights of the Elborz mountains to the foothills where Lord Sam was weeping on that bare stone. At first he did not notice that anyone was there. But then as he stood up, wiping the tears from his reddened eyes, he saw him, his son, tall, broad-shouldered, with those large black eyes like his own, as the midwife had told him, and that long mane of white hair falling to his shoulders. And when he saw his son there, so tall, so strong, he was filled with pride and then filled with remorse. How much I have missed the first step of my son, the first word he uttered. How many things I have missed in seeing my son grow up. How many things I have missed that will never return to me. And then he noticed that his son was naked, and he thought his son was shivering in the bitter winds of those foothills. And so at once he took the cloak from his back and wrapped it around his son and embraced him tightly and wept into the shoulder of his handsome young son and whispered in his ear, "My son," he said, "my son, now that I have you in my arms, you will never be banished from my heart ever again. My son, now that I have you in my arms, I promise that I will not refuse you anything you ask of me." And so from that day, Lord Sam returned with his son. And his son never left the castle of Lord Sam from that day forward. And Lord Sam gave his son a new name, and that name was Zaal. Zaal, which means old age.